Hello, welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports, and today we're going to talk about something other than what is in our stand today. That's a typical hashtag that I use here, but today we're going to talk about, this is going to be a series of videos that we're going to discuss pro cycling. And the reason is because the Belgium Classics have basically started, the Spring Classics as they call them, and today's date is March 29th, 2021. So racing season is full on for the professional peloton. But before we go any further, please like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends if they need to get just a little bit of the fundamental cycling knowledge. So these videos are going to be very watered down. They're going to be very elementary, and they're with fundamentals, and they're going to build throughout this series. So this is going to be a new hashtag, Pro Cycling 101, and it can be applied to amateur racing as well for certain things. But please hit that notification bell so that you are notified when I post another video. Now, we're up to 201 subscribers, so that's great. It's a huge uptick in only 1 month, and I really appreciate all of you who have already subscribed. So anyway, our next milestone is 500 subscribers, so let's get to that one. So please share it with your friends. All right, so let's start with number one. To me, and unless I'm mistaken, pro cycling is one of the only sports where up to 21 teams are competing against each other at the same time. So usually there's a home team and away team. You know, the uniforms are different based on whether you're a home team or away team. But I don't know of any other sport where 21 teams are racing at the same time. And these 21 teams, as of a few years ago, used to have 9 members per team. So you've got 180 plus moving parts, different strategies, different tactics, all kinds of things that can come out of 180 plus riders going down a road 25, 27 miles an hour all day long. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is a competition is held outside. Okay, tennis, football, basketball, baseball. Those types of sports are held outside as well. However, most of these other sports will either have a rain delay or a postponement. Football is one of those hardcore sports where you keep playing through the rain, through the snow, and things like that. So in that respect, it's similar, but in other respects, it isn't. So you have a controlled environment in most of these other sports that are played indoors. Climate control, you've got fans in the stands, so you want to keep them all comfortable. Let's say it's a basketball game. If it's a football game, a baseball game, they'll usually have a rain delay. They'll cover up the field. So there are some differences in that respect. But one of the big differences with pro cycling is that race keeps going, whether it's raining, snowing even. And one of the most famous images that you'll find on a Google search or whatever search engine you want to use is Bernard Hinault at the 1980 Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And pardon my pronunciation of these terms, of these cities. But April 20th, 1980. So this should have been well into spring, on our way towards summer. But it snowed. And out of 174 starters, only 21 finished that day. And Bernard Hinault, whose nickname is the Badger, he went on an 80-kilometer attack, and he finished 10 minutes ahead of the second-place rider. So snow does not stop a bicycling race. And, you know, this is also when we talk about wind. The Belgium races are known to have lots of wind. They have cobbles, they have lots of wind, lots of open areas. And that weather factor adds an extra element of excitement for professional cycling. It is common to see these big gaps between the peloton when they turn into a crosswind or even a cross tailwind, which is very dangerous as far as the riders. But it's very exciting for us as fans. These pelotons get split like a hot knife through butter. And if you're not lined up properly on an echelon, which is typically about half wheel of the rider in front of you, if the wind's coming from, let's say, the left, you will end up in the gutter. And if you end up in the gutter, then you have to start a new echelon behind you, but the echelon is actually starting from the left and you're all the way on the right gutter. Echelons, winds, crosswinds, exciting stuff, and it doesn't stop a race. So that's number 2. So number 1, up to 21 teams racing against each other, or competing against each other, I should say. Number 2, competition is held outside. So that is a very, very big difference. Number 3, and there's no timeouts. So in most other sports, you can call a timeout, and you may have an injury timeout, or you may have a coach that calls a timeout so he can get his team together, regroup, have another plan, or it's, let's say in basketball, you can stop the momentum of that other team because they're scoring, and you're coming up nil on your side when you're on the offensive. And so they call a timeout. And it's kind of frustrating sometimes as a fan if if your team has the momentum, that all of a sudden everything stops. And then commercial break, and you're sitting there waiting for the game to resume. But in professional cycling, there are no timeouts. The peloton keeps moving down the road. And if you crash, you got to get back up and get back on the bike. If you have a flat tire, you will have a crew vehicle that should come up alongside you pretty quick, but maybe not, especially if you're racing in Belgium in these really narrow streets and you're going through town. Your crew vehicle, your team vehicle may be way, way back, and it may take you a minute or 2 minutes, which is an eternity in pro cycling, for your team vehicle to come up and either hand you a new bike. Now, because of disc wheels, they're a little bit, the wheel change is a little bit longer, or you may get a new wheel or something. Maybe the Shimano neutral support, which used to be Mavic for many, many years, comes up and throws a wheel in your bike. So no timeouts. There are times when there are some unwritten rules, and we'll talk about those in a different video, but there may be a slowdown in the peloton if someone crashes. But what about nature breaks or comfort breaks? In other words, when you have to go to the bathroom, you're on a 4 or 5 hour stage, you've hydrated quite a bit before the stage, now you're in the stage and you're consuming bottle after bottle after bottle. Well, especially if it's a hot day, you are taking in tons of fluids just to stay at your optimal performance. So going back to that these events are held outside, you may have extreme heat in the middle of summer in July for the Tour de France, which is coming up on its 110th year, which is going to be pretty exciting. 110 years at this race, or 110 editions. We've had forced stoppage for the world wars, but other than that, it's been going. So let's talk about all that hydration, and you have to go to the bathroom. You have to do it while rolling. So oftentimes you'll see a cyclist being pushed by another cyclist as that cyclist is urinating. But okay, so up to 21 teams. It's held outside. The peloton never stops moving, so there's no timeouts. And one more, we have the no substitution principle. So typically in other sports, let's say baseball, you may have a hitter that comes in and they pull a player off the field, and now that player is hitter is put in for a strategic or tactical advantage, I should say. But in pro cycling, if you start the race with 8 riders and you have, let's say it's a stage race where it's a multiple day race, you may have crashes, you may have situations where your 8 riders get dwindled down. And now that becomes a huge detriment to your performance as a team, because let's say your opposing team, your arch rival, still has all 8 of their riders multiple days into the race. So no substitutions. You can't pull someone off the bench, put them in as a fresh rider. That just doesn't exist. So what's important to note too is when you form your team for said race, you want to make sure that all of them are fit, all of them are ready to race, and they're durable racers in the sense that if it's a 1-week race, have they been tested for racing for 1 week of solid riding? Or if it's a 3-week Grand Tour, have they ever done a Grand Tour? Will they last all of the 21 days of racing? So very important to know as you make your selection. And let's talk about one thing first. You do have a roster of, let's say, 24 racers. And then you select racers for your riders for your A races and your B races. And I don't know if they have a C calendar, but a lot of times you'll have 2 races running concurrently. This was very evident during the time that we had the Tour of California. So you had the Tour of California going at the same time as the Giro. And so where would you send your A team or your A list of riders? And just recently we had Paris-Nice and Tirreno Adriatico. Both of those were running at the same time. And so you had a who's who list that you had to split up. And some ended up at Paris-Nice and some ended up at Tirreno Adriatico. So it's really important that we note that with other sports, you can substitute someone, but not in cycling. So you start off with 8 in the World Tour teams. I think they're smaller numbers in some of the other races that are not part of the World Tour calendar. And that's it. As you continue to dwindle down, you can't put in another rider now. And things have gotten even more complicated now based on the COVID pandemic. So there are some riders who can't cross borders as quickly, or teams can't cross borders as quickly as others. And if you have a COVID issue in your team, that whole team has to abandon the race. So there's a lot of things going on. In other words, if you had a COVID positive rider, you can't just substitute a non-positive rider. So lots of things that make cycling different. This is a series of videos, and this is just video number 1. I'll cover a few more things in the next video, but in the meantime, if you thought this information was valuable, if you thought it was interesting, and you'd like to share it with other folks, please do. And please subscribe as well, because it's really important that I get my subscription base up and eventually get this to a point where I'm doing a lot more videos instead of other things. But anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate your attention, your time today, and we'll see you on the next one.